Good morning. We want to talk to you today about once you get your kit from the Siemens distributor, how to put it together and get yourself going with the software and the hardware, and we want to get all those parts and pieces put together. So stay tuned, and we'll give you those directions as we go through this tutorial. Well, again, we want to look at the parts and pieces that you will be receiving from your purchase of the kit, and also the other parts and pieces that you will need to get through this project, or to get through this course, or really both of your courses, the EET 2410 and EET 4550, or if you're taking it as an EECS student, EECS 4220. But here's some of the parts and pieces you're going to get from the vendor. You're going to get a software, a box with software in it, and I'm going to go through that in a minute, what we're going to get in the software box. You're going to get a programmable controller. This is a 1215 DC version 4.4, firmware 4.4. And you're going to get a cable. These are the three parts you're going to get from the vendor or from the distributor. Now, along with that, you're going to have to furnish a power supply, and there's various ways of doing that. One way is to buy and I recommended this from Amazon, a $21 5 amp 24 volt system like this, and you recognize this. This would be something like you would get it with your Dell computer, and you would plug this end in, and that would go to the wall. That would go to the wall, and this end would have a little plug on it, and that little plug you would then wire to the PLC. Now, the PLC has on it, right up here, an L and an M, and this is where you want to wire your 24 volts into. The 24 volts goes to the L, the 0 volts goes to the M. So I would use a red wire, and this has little ends to it, but you don't have, you could just use a 20 gauge wire if you want to, or something like that. But you can use just about any jumpers, and you would put the red or the plus lead under the L, and you would run it to the plus side of this little jumper, and you would tie that down. And you would do the same to the black wire. Got to get them in there secure. And tighten them down. Same to the black. And when you're ready, you plug this into the wall, plug this into here, and you got your 24 volts. Now this one is not set up yet to do that, but if you do that, the light will come on and you're all set. Now the downside of these guys is if you were to ever jumper the plus to the minus, these don't have very good protection. The better protection would be with a more sophisticated power supply. The downside of that is that you have a issue with having to have a cord. So you have to have a cord with the power supply. So you have to get a cord someplace, and this is the end you'd plug into the wall, and this is the end you would cut off, physically cut this end off, and you'd end up with something like this. After you've cut the end off and stripped away the 3 leads, you would have something like this. Now, if you're fortunate, If you're fortunate, there will be a brown, a blue, and a green, and with a yellow. Okay, this is color coded because this is your plus lead, your 110 volts. This is your neutral or your 0 volts for your AC, and this is your ground wire. They must be appropriately wired onto your power supply, or it won't work. So again, if you open it up and it doesn't have a brown and a blue and a green, or a green and yellow, then you're going to have to seek some help to find out the exact which is the hot, which is the neutral, and which is the ground. That said, if you do have, you'll strip back just enough on this to put it on a power supply. Now I'm going to do that in a second, but I'm going to go through and talk to you about a couple power supplies first, and we're going to talk to you about a decent power supply and a little bit better power supply, and which one you probably would want to look at. Okay, so this is one power supply that you might be interested in. This one has the 110 right here and the neutral, and this one has it has the 24 volts out right here. Now the problem with that is these are really close to each other, and if you are not sure, or you bring these too far back and you twist these can jumper out here. And they can also, if you ever had a real accident, they could jumper down to here, and if you ever jumper down to here, then it would jumper over to your PLC, and you'd have a real mess, and that would probably destroy your PLC. This is probably a better one, and this is the you can talk to your distributor, or you can buy one on your own, or you can find one on your own. But this is a PM 1207. Now this little power supply is 5 amps, and it's pretty good, and it has the 110. Now the fellow who's done this is he put a little barrier over the 110 so that nobody could get in there and mess with the 110. But you see that the distance between the 110 and the 24 volts, and this is significant. And then you can wire straight over from the 24 volts over to the 24 volts on the PLC. So this is the ball and tube lab, the PM 1207, probably one of your better power supplies for this type of application. You can go out and buy a third-party power supply as well, but again, if you're just dealing with one source, I would recommend the 1207. You can get one like this as well. If you buy one like this, some of them, if you hook the 110 in, it has a it'll determine whether it's 110 or 220. Some have a switch on the back, this one doesn't. This one is a little bit more sophisticated. This would accept 110 or 220, but it does not have a switch. It'll automatically switch and give you the voltage out. So put the voltage in, it'll give you the voltage out. You don't have to worry about whether it's 110 or there's a switch. Some of them do have a switch in the back. You got to be careful. You got to watch for that. Okay, also in your workings with this, you're going to probably want to have a kit like this. Now many of you already have a kit like this from another course. This is from Elegoo, and it's an electronics fun kit, something you can buy on Amazon. What that gets you is little jumpers. It gets you a breadboard, and it gets you jumpers, and it gets you all kinds of LEDs and diodes and things like that. And we use those in some of our labs. So if you're interested in buying something like this, you can. The jumpers come in it. The breadboard comes with it. It's a very inexpensive $16, $18 ad, but again, we've got $189 in these parts. You need a power supply in addition, and $21 is about as low as you can go on that. $16 to $18 on this, and you're in pretty good shape. Now you obviously need a computer, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but you have to have a computer with Windows either 7 or 10 64-bit on it for your software, and a DVD recorder. Now if you don't have a DVD or a CD recorder reader, you can either borrow one from somebody else, or they have these remote ones, so you can do that as well. Now this one has 110 coming into it, and it also has a output to the computer through a USB port. So this one is It's an outboard CD reader, and you might have to use one of these, or you might be able to get the vendor of the PLC to provide the software on a USB stick, and ask them if that's what you need. If you don't have it if you don't have a CD on your computer or a CD reader, then you might ask them to provide you a separate the software separately on a stick. Okay, so now we're just going to look at the software, and we're going to look at it, and then we're going to later on we're going to look at it in the parts and pieces, and we're going to say, okay, now we're unbundling it, and there's various items here, and I'm looking to see there was a here it is. This is the license key. So mine has gotten back underneath here, but this is how your software will be made to be able to work. Once you've gotten it out, you can find it back in there. It's a separate little that's a USB stick, and it's a license key. So that's we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so you look at the software that you get, and there is PLC Sim, which you may load if you want to. I didn't, because I believe pretty strongly that most of the labs should be run not with a simulator, but with the actual running them on a PLC. But you can, if you want to use a simulator, you may use that, and you can load that software. This is the start drive software, and this is the one that you want to use here. This is the Step 7 Basic and Professional, Step 7 Safety, WinCC Basic, Comfort, and Advanced, and the WinCC Unified. Now, this is version 16 of this software, and one of the things you want to do is you definitely want to realize that even though you load all this software on here, your key, this license key, only is for the Win or the Step 7 Basic. So you may load it all on there, but your key is only going to allow you to use the Step 7 Basic. So in a minute, we're going to look at this, and we're going to load all these programs, and we're going to show you how to do that. But basically, this is the key that you want, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So we're back, and we now have a couple of lengths of wire to go from the power supply to the PLC, and we have the ends cut, and I put a little bit of solder on each of these ends, and I made sure that the exposed end was fairly not more than like 3/8 of an inch, no more than at least half of an inch exposure. So I want to test and see if this is the right length, because I want to put them into these three slots, and the L goes with the brown wire, remember? And if it is too long, if there's any exposed wire, I want to trim it back so I don't have any exposed wire. I don't want to see any copper wire outside of this, underneath this terminal. I may have to trim a little bit off in the end so that I don't have any exposure. So again, I want to get this wire in here, and I want to look and see if there's any exposure. And there really isn't, but I may just trim just a little bit of it off in the end anyway, just to make sure that for sure there's none. And I'm going to do that just a little bit and put that wire underneath. And I don't want to see any copper on that when I tighten this down. So that's my brown wire goes on the L, and the blue wire goes on the N. And again, I probably will trim just a little bit just to make sure that there's no copper being visible on that. And when you trim copper off, you want to make sure that it doesn't go into anything that is electronic. You want to make sure that it falls on someplace that is, you can clean it up afterwards. So don't ever trim something over something that it can fall into. So that's another thing that you don't want to do. And I got to loosen the end a little bit more here, and we'll put that wire under there. Tighten that one down really good. I don't want to see any copper at all. Whether you use this power supply or the 12 1207 power supply. Same rules apply. You don't want to see any copper. You don't want to have any frayed wires. When you do your soldering, you want to solder all the wires and make sure that there's none that are left frayed. And the ground is the yellow and green. Make sure that there's no frayed wires coming out of any of these, and I can't see any copper on any of them. Tighten those down and always test at each step just to make sure that nothing's going to happen. And I'm going to plug this in and I'm going to see if it works. So I'm going to run over here real quick, see if I can plug this in and see if it works. So let's do that. Plug it into 110. It seems to be okay. Everything seems to light up. The green light's on, and you see how close these wires are to the 24. But you want to make sure that these are tight and that they're kind of off to the side, because as you use this again and again and again, these will get twisted. You definitely want to make sure that these are protected and that they're not going to come loose, and that you're never going to have any fraying or anything exposed out of those three wires. Okay, I'm going to unplug it. And I'm now going to plug in my red and black to the 24 volts on the PLC. Upper left-hand side of the PLC, the L goes to the plus. And again, short lengths of exposed wire. Even though this is 24 volts and it's not going to hurt you, 110, it hurts. So you definitely don't want to get exposed to it. But it's mainly 110 can basically just hurt your electronics. So it can hurt you, but it can also hurt your electronics. So be careful with it. And that's why the 1207 or other power supply that has a greater separation than this one does. This one's okay, but you just got to be very careful. Plus to the L, minus to the M, and there's two terminals under each here, so I can use either one. And then we have a short section of a jumper that we need to install, and that's the one that is for the jumper. Now we have the L that comes in is a 24, the M that comes in is the 0. This is a ground, and we don't need to hook that up. Here is the L that comes from this one, so it goes in and it comes back out. So this is another source of power for feeding everything else. You want to hit this one with our power, but this one is a separate source of 24. Excuse me. This M has to be jumpered to this M in order to make these inputs work off of this power supply. Now, if we wanted it to work off of another power supply, we could. If we wanted to, we would bring in another power supply and have it power the inputs, and then the M would be from that power supply. So we would not do this jumper if we had a separate power supply for the inputs. But we usually just use, so this is our ground, this is our second L, this is our M coming in, and this is our M that is for the jumper for here. So they give you the option of either using the power supply that is jumpered in for this, or you can use the separate M. And we very rarely, if ever, do that, but sometimes you might find that that's an advantage. You can do that, but for us, we're going to do that jumper right there. Now let's test this again, make sure that everything works. I've got our 110, and now we're going to plug this in and see if everything works. So far so good, right? And it's blinking. See the blinking? Okay. Well, that's good. Now the other thing we can do at this point in time is we can just show how we do a test on our on our inputs. So this would be a wire that I could use to test some of my inputs. So I would use this jumper from the L. In other words, I want to test to see if this input is on. So I use the L, and I can go down here and I can touch various inputs. This would be I0.0. There's the LED for I0.0. There's 0.1. There's the LED for 0.1. So this is turning on specific inputs. So I can go down and just do that, and I can leave that jumper dangling like that. There's no problem. Make it short, make this long, so it's never going to touch up there. But you can do that. So it kind of gives you an idea of the setup. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to load the hardware, load the software, and then we'll come back and we'll do the final phase, which is the download of the. We won't do a download in this program, but basically, you can be ready to do a download. Again, we're now in the computer, and we have loaded the software off of the one disk that was the one for the basic and professional, and we've loaded all those files and all those folders from that disk onto a folder, and all you have to do at that point in time is click Start and then answer the questions. So it will guide you through the process, and at the end of that process you will have 4 icons on your if you just load that one CD, you will have 4 icons on your screen. And one will see PCT port configuration, and I don't use that one. TIA administration, I don't use that one. I do use these two, however, the TIA Portal 16 and the Automation License Manager. The Automation License Manager is the one that we want to do this license key transfer. So when you first are successful, it takes 30 minutes or so to load the software and install it on your computer. But once you have installed it, you put that key, the license key, in the USB port, and then you go to the license manager and you find the drop down that says transfer, and you want to transfer the license from the D or E or whatever your USB is to the C drive. And once you've done that, then you can take that license or that license key out and store it away, and it really is of no use to you anymore, because you've transferred the license key onto the C drive. So you basically now are operating off of the C drive, and every time you boot up, you'll be able to use the TIA Portal 16, and that's the next thing we're going to do. And we're going to start with the programming of the programmable controller. So basically, that's all you need to do. So this is a fairly straightforward, but it's key that you use the Automation License Manager to transfer the license key from the USB drive to the C drive. We're going to now begin to look at a project from the Siemens point of view and build the software. And this is the TIA Portal software, and this would be what you'd first see when you are looking at a screen of the TIA. So you either have the portal view or you have the project view. And we're going to create a new project, and we're going to create a project, and we're going to call it Project 7. Click Create. And first off, we're going to do a 714 DC, 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 and then we're going to do a 715, and there's some slight differences between the two, and I want you to see those. So we're going to do this. It says it was successfully opened. It's a new project, so now I'm going to go to Project View. I like going through a Project View in order to make everything in the Project View. You can do it either place. This first part you can do either place, but I like to do it in the Project View. So now I come up here under Devices and Networks, and I see that there are none. So there's nothing in this area right here. But I want to add a new device. And I want to add a 714, S7 1214 DC, 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 this one right here. And I want to come down and pick this 40 because that's the one that I have. If I look on the computer, it has a little 40. My PLC, it has a little 1AG40 on it. Click on that, and now it's going to tell me that it wants me to do version 4.4. But I'm going to tell it, no, I want to do version 4.0 or 4.1. Let's select 4.0 because that's one of those, and let's click on OK. And these are the ones that we have a lot of these in our labs. The one that's used for the remote is the 715, but the 714s we have a lot of, so I want you to understand both. So now we have a 714 sitting here and looking at it. And this is just setting up a new processor, and you can add cards, you can add all kinds of stuff, but that's a bare processor there with no additional cards on it. And right here is an area for a signal board, and the 714s come without a analog out. So they basically at one time sold the kit with a signal board that you added right here, so that would give us analog out. Your digital ins are up here, your digital outs are down here, your analog in is up here, but your analog out you had to add. So I'm going to go over here under signal boards and come down here to AQ, analog out, click on that, drill down, and then find this card and drag it over and put it right over that slot. So now I've populated that slot with that signal board. So when I load the processor, I'll load it with that slot active. Now if you load it and it doesn't have that slot active, it should load, it'll give you an error. So you definitely want to be able to do the right, get it exactly right. You also have to have the right version. You also have to have the Ethernet port set up, and that's this little guy right here. It's a little green dot or a little green square. We click on it as well, and we come down here, and at the bottom we see Ethernet address, and you don't see it until you come down a little bit. But when you come down a little bit, you see it's 192.168.0 and 1, and we want to change that 1 to a 3. The addressing that we've set up in our lab is we don't use 1, we use 3. O2 is saved for the computer, so we typically use the computer as an O2, and the O3 then is saved for this processor. So we're going to click on that. We're going to put a 3 there, hit enter, and now we come up here. Now you have a choice at this point in time, but right click on the gray processor itself and you come up with this compile. Now there's a compile key right up here as well. You can compile this either place, but I like doing it this way because it gives you all these options. And I usually just click the first one anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but at least you now know that there's more than one place that you can click the compile key. Now, what are you compiling? You're not compiling anything. It's just a bare, no program at all, but at least you're compiling something that you can download, that you can see if it downloads. And now we want to try that. So we right-click again, download a device. Now again, where this download is, this is a download key right there. So we can do it either place, but I choose right now to do it this way. So I click on download to device, first choice, and then it comes up with this pop-up screen. It says configured access, 1214 DC, 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 PNIE interface type, 192.168.0.3, and it comes up here with this type as PNIE. That one has to be PNIE. Now this second one will vary based on the computer that you're using. Here I'm using on my laptop, I'm using this fast Ethernet adapter. Yours probably will say desktop card or something like that. So it's something, it will say that. Now, desktop adapter, that would probably be what most people would say. But anyway, we're going to come down here after you set those two. First one has to be PNIE. The second one can be that card, whatever that card is. And then click Start Search. And now you can see it's searching for that processor. Now we have the processor hooked up, so the Ethernet cable is in the PLC, and the power is turned on, you see this orange block here. It found it. And it says it sees one right there, and it's called PLC 1. I'm going to click Load. Now, you're going to hit various types of configurations when you do this. Sometimes it will say something in pink over here. This one didn't, but that's okay. And if I click Load now, it may come up, but it basically is going to sit there. And if there's something in pink, you have to address it. Okay? Now it loaded it. It says Start Modules after downloading, and say Finish, and it'll start, and it will run. Now that's a running processor. There's nothing in it to run, but it's a running processor, and you have that all set and ready to go. So that's how you start with this processor. Now, if you want to go to the programming blocks, you can look at them, and you can say, okay, this would start programming with main. At this point in time, you can go online, and you get the orange across the top that says you're online. You can click on main, and you can see that there's nothing there, but you can at least see the program. If there was a program, it would be in this area, and you could look at it, but there's nothing there. You can also check to see if there is anything running, and these little glasses are that, but again, there's nothing there, but you can get the green along the edge if you did have something that was there. So the green glasses get you the ability to see anything that is live. Now we're going to go next to the other processor, so I'm going to leave this one, and we're going to go to another project, and we're going to start that one with the 15 and the S71215. So we're going to exit this one. We're going to exit this project, say New. So we're going to kill that one. We're going to create a new one. And I'm going to save the project, this one. So we're going to save this one. And I'm going to go over and I'm going to plug in to the 1215. So we're going to look at the same basic steps, but with the 1215. And we'll do the same basic steps, but with a new processor. So this is the one that you would get in your kit. Devices and networks, add a new device. And this one, you would have used a 1200, and you come down to the 1215. Now, we also have in our labs some 1214 DC-DC relay, and that would be DC power, DC in, and relay output. So you must look at these and make sure that your output is either DC-DC-DC or DC-DC relay for the ones in the lab. So most of them are DC-DC-DC. Most of them are version 40. We have some 31s, we have some 30s, so you always have to look, and you always have to look between the DC-DC-DC and the DC-DC relay. Now here we're going to go down to the 1215, and we're going to pick the second one, which is a 1215C DC-DC-DC, and it's the 40 version, and we're going to go with 4.4 because that's the latest and greatest, and that's one we have. We're going to do the same thing. Now this time we do not have a signal board. We could put a signal board in there, but the analog output is already provided. So we don't have to do that step. And also we're going to come down here and we're going to set up our Ethernet port. So we do to click on that, and we do that. So we come down here and say 3 instead of 1. Come back up here and right click. Do the same thing we did before, hardware and software only, compile, and then right click and download the device, and again the Ethernet adapter, show compatible devices, start search, and it found it. So we click load. And it says we're going to wipe a bunch of stuff out, which we don't really care. And it says continue without synchronization. Now, what is synchronization? Synchronization is your ability to use the same set of PLCs in the same project while other people are doing the same thing. And I'm going to say, I'm the only guy in this thing, so I'm going to say without synchronization. Here, we run into something pink. And again, pink means stop, do the action, see what it is, stop all. We're stopping everything. Come down here, click Load. Loading configuration. So this is a 1215 DC, 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 and it is now being downloaded, and it says Start Module, and yep, you're fine, you're ready to go. Okay, now with this one as well, you can go online. You see the orange up here, you see the green balls down here. That means that the green balls down here mean that the program that's on the PLC is the same as the program that's in the computer. If you have different color balls other than green, it means that they're different. So this one's ready to go, and it's up and running, and we're all set. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about getting started with the processors from Siemens.